Welcome to Land Language, the podcast transforming landscapes from toxic to regenerative. We're your host, Brit from Blueprint Earth,
and co-host Bethany from Bethany Rydmark Landscapes.
We explore beautiful, functional design through conversations with scientists, vendors, contractors, and designers who are changing the industry.
Whether you're in the field or at the drafting table, join us as we explore regenerative practices that care for people, place, and planet.
Let's dig in. So we've got Lynn Morgan today. Lynn is a queen in the sustainable Northwest wood business. She is the director of operations.
Director of Community Engagement.
Director of Community Engagement.
And engaging the community. Exactly. Having fun, doing good work.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. I'm delighted to be here, delighted to be part of this conversation, and I'm just so honored that you've invited me to be part of this. I'm really very proud of what you're putting together. I'm really excited. So, yeah, thank you.
I'm really curious, Lynn. I know that we're jumping right into the topic, but I feel like you're this creative visionary, and then also you're working in this sustainable lumberyard. How did you get from where you started to this little niche that is now like a magnificent beacon for the whole region, looking at the work that you're doing and the people you're connecting with?
That's a really great question. It's been a journey for sure. I started with Sustainable Northwest Wood about 7 years ago after being in the paint industry for many years and running my own business, doing color consulting. My background is in interior design. And so as I was making a departure from that part of my life, looking for something rewarding in the realm of sustainability, and I really honestly didn't know what that looked like. And when that career transition, this job came up, and I knew the company. I'd actually was really familiar with Sustainable Northwest, who's the nonprofit that owns Sustainable Northwest Wood. It sounded really intriguing, but honestly, I didn't know anything about wood. Got through that interview process, and it just felt really good. It's a really small team trying to do a lot of great things. And so it checked a lot of boxes for me personally and what I was looking for in working with a small company, doing good things in the world. And so I've learned a ton and came full circle with how I grew up. My dad is a carpenter and a woodworker, and we have 75 acres in eastern Kentucky that he would selectively harvest logs to build with, and then also to chop up for firewood and things like that too. So as I was going through the process with this job, I'm like, yeah, this has been part of my DNA and how I was raised, and really came full circle. My very first job was at a lumberyard in my hometown.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, and so I was like,
in retrospect, you piece it all together. Wait, these roots have been growing for a long time.
Yeah, for a long time. And so even though I felt like I didn't know anything, I feel like that I came pretty well equipped and was eager to learn. One of my first apartments was I could hear the sawmill from my window. So all of these little threads have just woven real nicely to be where I am right now.
That's so cool to hear. I love when those stories, it's like the evidence of what gets woven into a story, and you realize, wait a minute, it was all here all along, and this is where it's complementing itself, and now look at this amazing season.
Exactly.
That's so cool.
I had no idea.
Your little girl self had no idea Dad was out there chopping wood.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So it sounds like you've been connected to the forest for a long time.
Yeah, I grew up in the Daniel Boone National Forest and just at the edge of that. And so the woods have always been my haven. It's always been my safe place. It's been where I've gone to hug trees, just like I did earlier today.
Before the show started, I love it. We're all out hugging a cedar tree and ground ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely been a big part of my life. And we foraged in the woods. We harvested trees for the warmth in our house, and just feeling that connection to Mother Nature has been really important to me since I was a little kid, and still is right now.
And that connection piece is so important because it's not just a resource. There is a relationship going on that it's not something you take for granted that you have on a shelf and you buy it and you go and you do what you want to do. Totally. It's coming from somewhere. There's something that was living and part of an ecosystem and part of a community. And ultimately, you would have a lot more to say than I would, how that trail follows through to what becomes a product that we construct with or that we use. But it has a story, and it's so much more full of life and value when we understand where it came from.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with that. It feels really important when there's a connection there that is much deeper than just buying something off the shelf that you don't know anything about. And we do that every day, right? But when you can find that value in the deeper story and go back to the roots of where something came from, it is really impactful in a positive way.
I find that to be true on projects that we work on where we get to specify materials. In landscape architecture, we're working with clients on how to construct their typically a private residence. But I know I've been able to share in the past even about the Juniper products that you sell and having this story and having a connection to where it's coming from and building that in the garden and having it become a part of the client's story of their space that they get to tell over and they get to revel in. It's so special. It's so rewarding to know that design can build up even more respect for Mother Earth and where we're getting what we're using.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that is a really valuable thing for the client at the end of that, to be able to tell that story.
Yes.
As opposed to I found this at some big box store.
Yeah.
There's a deeper level connection to that sourcing and where that wood came from. And Juniper is a really great example of that. One of the joys of my work is getting to go to Eastern Central Oregon where Juniper grows. And I worked at the sawmill for a couple of days during the pandemic.
Nice.
Yeah,
Good for you.
because he was really short-handed
Yeah.
and needed some help, and we needed the wood, and everybody's building garden boxes, and so I helped him get wood going into the kiln, and just like sorting the lumber and being able to touch and smell and see that coming off the mill, to talk with Kendall, the sawyer, and listen to all of his stories, and to see and feel his passion for what he was doing. A real land steward. And that was something that really took me by surprise, being able to just understand that hard work it takes to produce that lumber. And I asked him one time, I was like, why do you do this? I mean, there's a lot of directions that you could go. And he just waved his arm across the landscape and he said, this is why I do this.
And why is that? So there's this juniper that comes from Eastern Oregon, and we consider it a sustainably harvested wood. But why do we get to say that? Like, what makes it a sustainable wood?
I love this question. Juniper is a native to Oregon species, but because we have suppressed fires for the last 100 years, it has really exploded in population. 100 years ago, there was about 1 million acres of juniper in Eastern Oregon, and now there's over 10 million acres. It's taking over the grasslands, and it's a really thirsty tree. And so it's gobbling up a lot of the water. Eastern Oregon is really arid and very dry anyway. And so the removal of juniper is restoring the watersheds. And you can almost see within about a month of harvesting juniper around the creeks, the water returns to the creeks.
Interesting.
Wow.
That's so cool. I want to see some photos, some before and afters. That's amazing to hear.
Totally. There's some stories on the website as I was traveling through there. There's all these markers along the way on the highway that will mark Rose Creek and all these little creeks, but there's actually no water in any of those creeks. So
Interesting.
really interesting. And I just thought that was fascinating. And part of the removal of juniper is to restore the native grasslands over there as well. The sage grouse, which is the coolest bird that I've ever seen, is threatened because junipers are encroaching on all that grassland to thrive on. And so this sustainability piece comes in restoring the ecosystems and also providing a wood that is really durable and rot resistant. And it's like a natural element in the overall landscape when it comes from there into a project that you're building as a really beautiful look. And so I think the longevity plays into the sustainability of it. And then where it is sourced, it's doing a lot of good work in Eastern Oregon to restore the water and the grass in that particular area.
And the sage grouse.
Yes, and the sage grouse, which is the coolest bird ever.
And so you have it for sale in different versions of it, different sizes that you can purchase. So a lot of times we'll buy it for veggie beds or for terracing a landscape in 5x5 or 6x6. But then I've also seen some other cuts. Tell us a little bit about the application and where we can use it, and then a little bit about why we would maybe choose it over cedar or some of the other items that we would maybe go buy from another store that's not yours.
So I would say juniper is the most versatile of all the wood species that we offer. And we have it in garden box material, like 2x6 and 2x8. And it's a full dimension, really rugged, beefy piece of wood. Compared to cedar, it will last twice as long.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it's that much.
Yeah.
In grade?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a really cool piece because you don't want to have to replace your garden boxes that often.
It's expensive.
That's not sustainable and a lot of work. Yeah, we did a lot of work with Oregon State University to do a testing on the viability of juniper and how long it would last, and did testing for strength and durability and longevity. And in Eastern Oregon, some of the fence posts are made out of juniper, and those are lasting for 100 years.
Oh, wow.
Wait, what?
So, yeah.
Oh my God. Like in the ground
In
or
the
like
ground.
on stanchions
Yeah,
out of
in the ground. Yeah. And now granted, Eastern Oregon's a lot drier than it is here in our little rainforest. But in general, it's really long lasting. The newer growth cedar that we have access to these days, which we also offer either in incense cedar or western red cedar, it just doesn't have the aromatic oils that juniper has. And so that's what really gives it a longer life and helps it to last longer. So we are making decking material out of juniper. We're making exterior siding out of juniper, interior wall paneling. It's beautiful. It's got this gorgeous honey orange hue with a creamy sap. It's just beautiful. And then if you're leaving it outside, it will naturally gray over time. It just becomes part of the landscape. So it's a really beautiful product in general, but it's a little rustic. It's got a diverse amount of character because it's not really grown and groomed for its lumber. It's coming from restoration projects. So each piece is unique. It's highly varied. And so that's where, like when you're comparing it to cedar products, which are grown for its lumber, it's going to have more character and is a little bit more prone to twisting and doing some funky things that these really straight boards won't do. And so there's a little bit of thought and care for the installation and just the planning of how to use it, and then just some little tricks of how to work with it to be successful.
I'm super curious in that because I'm like, okay, so it seems like it's a really easy sidestep to go from cedar or ipe decking, which gets stacked all the time, both very beautiful as a finished product, but to sidestep to juniper, and here there are these intricacies of knowing how to work with it. Is it you really gotta select your lumber and push aside some twisted pieces? Is it you need screw holes in certain spacing? Is it you need the boards to only be an 8-foot lengths? Like what are the things?
All of those things. Check. So we try to minimize the lengths to 8 and 10 foot lengths, primarily because juniper as a tree, when it grows, it's more bulky and thick and bigger dimension at the bottom, and it tapers and gets more narrow at the top. And these trees don't get very big. And so just being able to keep that dimension within parameters that we have found over the years. We've been doing this since 2000. And so we've learned a lot about what works with juniper and what stretches the limitations, these ideal sizes to keep it in. So like if you're doing a deck and you need 16-foot boards, or you have this span, just need to plan a little bit differently on the overall design so that you can utilize that material as it comes to us from the mill.
And that's a really fun opportunity from like a design standpoint. Okay, you're working with 8-foot lengths. Very
patterning.
Yeah.
I'm gonna read.
Exactly. Let's get creative.
Which I feel like is such a big thing that we talk a lot about in our design and construction business. It's just like working with the material to make sure that what you're designing doesn't leave these 1-foot gaps, but like how do you plan based on the material that you are speccing in the end to make the finished pattern and finished build look right?
Yes. One of the things that I do when I'm working with a design team also is just to try to educate on what's available, what's coming from what is readily at our fingertips, as opposed to the other end where you're designing for the ideal scenario and just trying to share what's coming from the forest and be able to use that and utilize that in a good way.
Wheels are turning in the back of my head on this pool house project I have coming up, and I would love to see it built with juniper instead of our typical. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
And I like TNG in the ceiling. Is that kind of one there?
Oh yeah, we have it.
You have it?
Yeah.
I can TNG my whole pergola and cedar. What am I doing?
So I'm curious, when you're sourcing wood, how do you go about ensuring that these things that you're bringing in are truly sustainably grown and sourced and brought in for the client? There's so much greenwashing, and sometimes that truly, as a designer, as a landscape architect, there are so many labels thrown around, there's so many ideals, and then there are also the ways to just get it done the way that people expect to get it done. And I feel like sometimes you're swimming in the sea of, okay, Do these certifications mean anything? Is this true? Are people actually following the rules? I don't know. My cynical self can get overwhelmed, but I also have so much trust in you, particularly as a human being. You're such a joy, and I know you care so much about this. So give me some insight about how you're making sure that what you're bringing to the client, to the designers, is really a different product than the more exploitative and wasteful, if I can put those words out there, options that are also on the market.
This is probably my favorite part of the job, is to actually go visit the forests, visit the landscapes where the material is coming from, talk to the land stewards, and then also seeking out FSC certified wood. And we can talk a little bit about certification. In the realm of greenwashing, FSC is really putting a kibosh on that. It's a nonprofit, third-party audited system that helps forest managers manage to the highest degree of sustainability. And then there's a whole chain of custody that goes from the forest to the sawmills where it is cut into lumber to the retailer that's selling the product. And so it's a really intense system, and it's legit. And it's what a lot of architects and designers really rely on, as a stamp of approval that you know for certain when you can't get out to the forest and visit with a local tribe, is doing things in it. But be able to put your boots on the ground and actually go visit the sites is probably the biggest thing. And then when that's not possible, seeking out a certification that's legit. And FSC, the Forest Stewardship Council, is about half of our business. And the other half is coming from restoration projects, forest thinning projects, tribally sourced wood, and verified vendors. We go through a lot of vetting, talking, and paperwork to make sure that people are doing what they say they're doing.
Would you describe the finished conditions of the land when something's been sustainably harvested? I don't know if that's too generic of a question, but if I'm out there, your boots on the ground to see what these operations are running, I'm also a little bit bitter because I have a route that I drive up in rural Washington. I drive through a lot of forest land where I can just see clear cuts, and I can just see, it's wild to just watch how much gets chopped down and carted off. And my heart breaks when I drive by these enormous piles of disheveled trees. I'll get all emotional and sad because it's awful. I hate to see it, but I also know we live in a world where we need products built, we need things built, we need homes, everybody's garden beds, we need all these things. So when I see that example of forestry, it breaks my heart. And when then I hear about these other options, I want to know what that end looks like at the tail end of harvest. How can I help share that story with clients so that they can grasp it? By choosing these better alternatives, we're actually contributing not only to their beautiful product, but also to another part of nature that will be hopefully more healthy and beautiful and long lasting. So tell me about it, because I haven't been out there to see what these look like.
I would first invite you to join us, because we do forest tours. Being able to experience it and witness it and actually see it in person is really impactful. And we can tell you the stories about it, and you can see a lot of that work. But to drive through an area where on one side of the road is a plantation that's been clear cut, it's been harvested. There's literally nothing growing because it's been herbicided, and everything besides the little dug for seedlings is decimated. There's no wildlife, there's no songbirds. Literally, it feels desolate, and then it feels really sad. It feels apocalyptic. It really does. And it's sad. It's a heartbreaking thing to experience. And then across the road is the land that's been managed to FSC standards, that's been selectively harvested in open areas, and you see the understory, the Oregon grape, and the ferns. The whole landscape is alive, and you can feel that, and you can see it, and you can hear it. But there's been a harvest that was just done not too long ago, and so you can see some stumps, and you can see where the land has been impacted, but it still feels like a forest because it still is a forest. And so these working forests where you have a land steward that's really taking care of the land, FSC allows some clear cutting, but compared to 120 acres that's allowed by state law, 40 acre minimums, 40 acre maximums are done through FSC. And there's a lot more retention, so they have to keep a lot more trees on those cut blocks. The stream buffer, where you have to be further back from these little tributary streams that feed into the larger streams that help our salmon, that provide clean water. These trees are also left in the ground longer. They're in 80-year rotations as opposed to 35 or 40. So all that carbon storage and the good things that come from leaving trees in the ground longer, protecting old growth. protecting those high conservation areas. That's all part of the way the Forest Stewardship Council guidelines are set up. So those areas are protected, and you can feel the difference when you're there. And it's a really inspiring way and a deep contrast in different ways to get lumber into the market.
I may be asking too much of this process of logging because it still is logging, but I'm so curious because like right now we're working on a restoration project together, and I'm so curious like what machines have to go in and grab. And then there's this naked earth that's left. Is there seed that's tossed back on so that there isn't this invasive uprising that comes from all of this naked earth on the land? Is that part of FSC?
Replanting is part of FSC, and I think the way that the things are harvested and just cared for in general allows the natural things that would want to grow there anyway to come back on its own. So not necessarily like the scattering of seeds, but like creating openings so that the understory can come back on its own, as opposed to just decimating the whole cut block. And replanting is a big part of that. It's required by state law also, but there's a real watching of how the trees are growing and protecting them from the elk and the deer that are coming through with sleeves on the little seedlings, and then letting them get big enough so that they can thrive on their own.
I'm just picturing this version of the world. End up with enough of the elder generation of trees that are remaining. You haven't taken everything away, so you still have some of that shade and shelter so that the next generation of our Oregon grapes and our ryebees and the ferns that are popping up, instead of trying to emerge unsuccessfully into a scorched and barren, heat-struck land, they still have a shelter and they have that way to grow into their own maturity under the shade of what's there and see the mid-story restored and all. Anyway, it's exciting that I think about it. I'm thinking about that even just in terms of our generations of humans and how we caretake and what it means to continue to let those generational wisdom pieces shelter each other. And then we get to learn from all generations. We get to take care of the young. The elders give us good guidance. There's so much richness, right? And you see that pattern. And if we can translate it back and forth between us as humans and what's going on in the land, all of that supports and nurtures such a rich life. And the alternative, as we see, when we're cut off, when there's no relationship, when you're out on your own with no contact, we were talking about this earlier before we started recording, right? The richness of community, when you have people to reach out and ask a question or look for help or share a resource, there's so much more possibility for health and flourishing. And it's fun to think about that in nature. It's fun to think about it in relationships. And hopefully all these things inform each other and we can help heal our way into a healthier future for every generation that's trying to survive.
That's just so beautiful. And we learn from our mistakes too. Yeah. You can see how things have been done. Here in Oregon, especially, like we cut all the old growth trees. But when we find little pockets of that magic that either got missed by the surveyor or were intentionally saved, the learning and the opportunity to gain wisdom as we go, it's really important.
I'm thinking of the nature version of it, of what you just talked about, the ryebees on the forest edge, and then they get the opportunity to scatter into the sun and then be ready for those next generation to grow up as the ones that they just lived in are going to harvest.
Exactly.
Yeah. So sweet. We, of course, have to ask about the biggest project I think you've ever done, which is the PDX remodel. And just more than just asking about it, there was so much lumber that obviously went into that. I think everyone sees it and it's obviously stunning. And I'm really curious who was positively or negatively impacted by that, just because we get to hear the stories of where the wood comes from, the tribes and the communities. And I can't imagine what a project like that would do for them in terms of an economic boost or feeling empowered in doing what they're doing and the way they're doing it. And I'm just curious about the story of where the wood came from.
It's an incredible story. I feel so honored to be part of that project. We started working with ZGF probably 8 years ago or so when they came to us and wanted us to consult on this project originally. And Ryan Temple, our president, was embedded in the thought process of this. And the Port of Portland was really wanted to be very intentional. ZGF designed this beautiful wood structure, and just even for our part, we supplied close to 800,000 board feet of lumber for this project. The port wanted to do it sustainably, and they actually wanted to know where the wood came from so they could tell that story. They wanted this to be a regional project where local forest owners could be part of this. And they weren't really sure how to go about that because everybody else at the table was saying that's not really how the lumber industry works. And that's true. Typically, you go into a store and you buy a piece of wood, and there's no way to know where that came from. And the biggest thing about this project was the intention and the thought behind it, and then the collaboration with more than a dozen local forests who honestly would usually never be able to be part of a project like this. And to work with them, the port visited every forest that the wood came from. And so they got to experience and talk with the land stewards and walk the land and to really see the impact. A lot of this wood came from restoration projects. Many of these people that participated in it, the economic piece of that, there are thousands of people that worked on that project, in addition to all the landowners and how the wood was sourced. They were really very interested in working with local tribes. So just all of those people had to come together in order to supply the wood, to harvest it, to have it milled, and then to install it. So it's a huge community project, something that we can all be really proud of. And now we all get to tell the stories. Like when you walk into the airport, you can see these little markers that certain aspects of it, it will tell you exactly where the wood came from. And so that's really cool to be able to point to the concession stands and know that wood came from the Cow Creek Umpqua tribe, and to point to the glulam beams up in the ceiling and know that came from the Yakima. And so all of these different aspects, to be able to literally point to the wood that came from these special places is really empowering, and it's important. And I think it will be a beacon for what's possible. People, I think in general, have an idea that sustainability could be out of reach, or that it's difficult to achieve, or that there wouldn't be enough sustainable wood that would be able to go into this project. And so I think it lays the groundwork to show that this type of forest management and the work that's been done here, it can be duplicated, and you just have to be intentional. And it takes planning, and it takes collaboration. Takes thinking outside the box, all of those creative juices going to be able to bring something like that together.
So it's like knowing some of the things we've already talked about, looking at this, like what are the board legs that we get to work with this application, and then how are we going to lay it out so that it works, and then how does this wood fit together with all the other things, just all of the things, right? But that's really good design. I agree and echo just doing larger scale projects. I think it's even easier to say, we just need so much of that, so let's go get that from X Lumber because they're a big team, but not realizing that y'all are a big team too.
Collective, there's 5 of us, there's 6 of us now at our shop, but it's that collective that is so satisfying to build community in that way, and to build those relationships, to build that trust, and to be just like the integrity and intention behind this project. Really special.
I think about just the scale of the storytelling possibility when you're able to push it forward in a place like PDX, right? This airport's incredible. We have so many guests and visitors that are coming into the area, and we have so many of us locals that are leaving and coming back. To have a place where you can, as you shared, point to a specific place and a specific material and know that it was rooted directly to this plot of land. You could look it up on a map or go out and see it. Re-knitting together the world that we live in and its connections to the actual land that originated the sourcing of the thing. I think that's incredible, again, in a private garden, but especially in these larger scale places where humanity in a large sense can start to reacquaint itself with our roots. I think that's probably one of my little missions in life, is that we are so untethered. The risk is there to feel so disconnected from where materials have come from, what the things are that are shaping your daily life. That's part of that kind of free-floating, uneasy feeling, I think, of being a human when you don't have a connection. And by the same token, being able to just educate and show folks this is where it came from. There is a story here. This is something that was thoughtful, and we can all collectively be proud of this. As a traveler going from the airport, I'm so proud of this. I'm so proud to walk down the hallway and see photos of women that I've met through your group, in fact, Lynn, that have been involved in these forestry projects. It's inspiring to me to remember that every little and every big bit counts for helping we train ourselves as a species to be aware of how we really are connected and how our decisions for how we're building impact the wider landscape. That's really what this conversation is about, right? How we can decide to design and construct in ways that honor the full life cycle and to build a world that feels nourished and deeply cared for. I'm giving you my ramble and I'm thinking about the scale of PDX being so inspiring, because how many other airports have we flown into and out of, not to diss on them? Okay, it's a building, it's a box, who knows where those things came from? And yet Portland is celebrating this really incredible story and honoring our tribes that have had land and had these resources in their care. How can we honor the incredible examples that they're sharing with us and bring that to the fore and teach ourselves to recalibrate what we expect for quality and what we expect for connection and build a better world?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the small impacts that you make on your day-to-day decisions, like when you see it in that scale that PDX has done, that has a huge impact. So it has a huge impact on our community, on our water sources, on all the things that a forest will do. And to be able to honor that, to walk into that airport and know that you have landed in timber country, but also to know every step of that wood was sourced with care and attention and is leaving the forest better for it.
That's fascinating to me. And I'm so glad that you shared that story about the watersheds being restored, because that's sacred.
Yeah.
And important
For
so many creatures on this planet.
for all of us. Water is life. There's a reason that's a term, because it's true without it. And that's a resource we really have to be very mindful of caring for, especially as the climate is changing. It's longer, hotter, drier summers. And so water is it.
And with the longer, hotter, drier summers, we're seeing the impact on the cedar locally. And I think that I would guess that how forests are going to be managed are going to be based on the next 50 years experience of the quality of work with the cedar in our forest. And do you have any insight into what that might look like, or maybe what approaches are being taken now to prepare for that, or in response to it?
Yeah. In talking with forest managers, the western red cedar is really suffering right now. And it is a huge resource as far as the wood species go. It's in high demand, and there's real concern about what's happening with our cedars. They're dying because they're not used to this long, hot, dry summers, and so they're not adapting very well. And so what several of the forest owners that we work with, as they're planning for trees that they're not even going to be here to see. So this is way future planning, but looking into other species. Incense cedar is much more drought tolerant. And in planting and planning for future harvests, looking at other species that are more adaptable, actually looking at species that are growing in California where it's already hotter and drier, bringing those as future harvest possibilities, and really looking at where in the forest you're planting these things and just preparing for the next 100 years. And so it's really cool to see visionaries like Sarah Doimling at Zena Forest. She's got a beautiful piece of property. They supplied all of the wood flooring that's in PDX, all that Oregon white oak. And she's an elder for us, and her son is managing and taking the lead for the next step. Her whole family lives on that forest, and so they're greatly impacted by any kind of harvesting activity because they live on the land, and that deep connection and that deep care in what they're trying to do and plan for. I was specifically one forest that I visited that she was talking about the species that they're planning to plant, and if she's here another 25 years, we'll all be really lucky. And she was planning for things that are going to happen 100 years down the road for her grandchildren.
So they have land to harvest
And be able to supply the public with the wood that it needs.
Definitely. I think a lot about how to take this conversation forward, because for us, a lot of times it's the conversation we get to have with the client. And the story sharing is so important. And then knowing how to work with the wood is so important. And I'm curious because you also get to talk to the end user all the time who might be a homeowner who's buying from you. How do you have that conversation with them that helps them know that this is the right decision? And then what's the price point difference between maybe something they could buy that's cedar or more common and then going to Juniper? There is a price point difference.
Yeah, pricing is always part of that conversation. Most people are on a budget of some sort. And so that plays into it, definitely is a piece of the conversation. But in general, I just try to meet people where they are and try to uncover what their values are, like what's important. And through that process of even just walking around the lumberyard with the different options that are at your fingertips, to be able to tell the story of the restoration, for Juniper to be able to tell that this cedar is FSC certified and comes from a little mill just south of Portland, to be able to tell them that the incense cedar is being sourced from the Cow Creek tribe in Southern Oregon and from a little sawmill over in La Pine, that these are community organizations that are trying to do the right thing. And so cost comes into that. And what we find over and over again is that people think that sustainably sourced wood is going to be automatically more expensive. And honestly, I think it should be, because of the care and intention that goes behind, and the forest managers that are doing the right thing. They're not harvesting all their wood, and they're being thoughtful in their planning and all of that. But it's not necessarily more expensive. And like with framing lumber, we get comments all the time. That's the same price as at the big box store, and it's a higher quality. It is a beautiful wood to work with, even though it's just a stud for framing a house. And we get to tell that story that came from the Collins Company, one of the oldest FSC certified forest operations in the country.
Wow.
And so those little things, even if it's just a brief little moment of telling somebody where that wood is coming from, that adds value right out of the gate. And we have several builders that we're working with right now that are very interested in sourcing tribally sourced wood. So we're doing some market research to see what the general public feels about that, and how do we get the money with that stick of wood back to the forest. And so trying to be more collaborative with the forest owners that we work with, and creating programs that a builder can specify a forest that he wants to support, and we will rebate part of the purchase back to the actual forest.
So cool.
Really trying to do some things that will benefit the people that are doing the hard work of caring for the land that our wood comes from.
So really it's just about knowing about it and knowing about you.
Yes.
Northwest Woods. And then it's a sidestep in terms of money. It's not necessarily more expensive. It's just having the right information.
Yeah. And I think that demystifying that little piece is something I do every day. Some products can be a little bit more expensive, but generally it's not a deal breaker, especially when you can share a little bit more about came from the resources, like the little businesses that we're supporting locally. The big thing with sustainability is to buy local. You're going to buy your groceries at the farmer's market as opposed to whatever store you might be able to pick it up off the shelf and have a connection to your food. And it's the same kind of movement. We're really seeing people caring a lot more about where their wood is coming from and knowing the kind of impact that they can make with their purchases. And so it's a feel-good situation for the end user, and it really is beneficial for these small companies that we're working with in Oregon. And that, for me, is the most satisfying part of the job, is making that connection. It's like we see ourselves as a bridge between the forest and the built environment. And like architects and designers don't necessarily know where and how to source things, but we want you to use us as a resource.
We're gonna hold our hands on that. Exactly. I love it. It sounds like slowing down enough to be curious and ask the questions ultimately leads us in such positive directions, right? So even just take a beat. Don't go and buy the same thing off the same shelf for the same umpteenth time. Just slow down and ask. Maybe there's a possibility here.
Yeah, totally.
I know my first project that I got to do with your products was similar. It was just like, all right, maybe we can build this cool custom arbor trellis thing that we're doing in the client's backyard. I think we can do this with a different material. Let's go chat. And we learned so much, and we had so much fun, and we built this thing that was ultimately beautiful. It's going to be long lasting. It gets so many compliments. It's so fun. And we probably could have just constructed it out of typical whatever. Again, it's been a few years. I don't remember the cost difference or if there even was one, but ultimately it was just the slowing down, being curious, that then gave us an end product that's so much more fun and has a story. And so that possibility is out there for any of us in our industries to ask a question, scratch your head and wonder, pick up a phone, call somebody that might have an idea. Don't feel bad that we don't know. I guess that's one of the things, even this whole podcast conversation in my world is like, don't feel bad for what you don't know. Just get curious and ask, because everybody has some insights here, and we can start knitting them all together and learn better ways. And the results are going to be beautiful.
Curiosity is a really great place to start, is ask questions. And that's what I do in my job. I'm asking the customer questions, asking the client questions, asking the designer questions. What's the end goal? What's important to you? Yeah. And curious about, there's lots of different ways you can go about any project. And getting aligned with the goals, with the values, with what's important, being open and curious will get you far in life.
That's for sure. It's so special to learn these things, and I'm so grateful for you to just really wrap it up in a pretty bow. in a sweet accent. There's so many people who I hope get to listen to this that aren't with us in Oregon or in the Northwest. And I'm so curious, is there anyone else like you that you know of anywhere in the country?
Unfortunately not. I've said for a long time, like somebody asked us one time what success would look like in our business. And I think it's if we have a lot more companies doing what we're doing. I think you could find them. But I think by and large, we are really unique in that everything we sell is local and it is responsibly sourced. So in most stores, you can find an organic section. You can find maybe some FSC certified wood on the shelf in other places, but it's like, this is the whole focus of what we're doing. And we've been around since 2008, launched in the height of the worst recession that we've had so far. And we've been growing ever since because I think people really want this connection. They want that story. They want to have their choices have a positive impact. And it's really satisfying to be able to do that. And we're talking about opening a distribution center in Seattle. The next big step for us and
Grow big.
Yeah, exactly. And little baby steps so we're not growing too big too fast. And also just checking in with people to make sure this is really what they want. And I don't think they do.
There's no money difference. It's just simply a little bit of design difference. And then it's a lot of knowledge and support of the local community difference. It doesn't sound like there's anything bad.
I know, it's a no-brainer, really. Yeah, it's only good stuff.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I have one final question. When you were a kid, and now as Lynn, you're still a kid.
Still a kid. That's true. Just a big kid.
Is there a beat of purpose that has kept you going in life? That is your thread that brings you forward?
Ooh. Gosh, that's a really good question. The thread for me is the connection to the land, and that I get to do this for work to tear up a little bit. Actually,
that's the best.
Yeah, but I really do. I think it is. That thread is caring for the land the way I saw my grandfather and my grandmother and my dad. This piece of property that I grew up on has been in our family for several generations now, and to see sustainability and action from the time I was a little kid growing up in Appalachia, where you really had to utilize your resources and not waste anything and reuse what was available to you, that has carried me through every aspect of my life. It's led me to this career and doing something I really love and feel passionate about. And it's how I was raised.
What a treat. Thank you for sharing so much of your story and your passion. I originally encountered you with the wild world of Instagram, back probably around that time when you were launching WISE, probably Women in Sustainable Endeavors. And your joy and infectious passion for what you're doing just comes across in all channels. But it's especially fun to sit around today and just be in person and hear it. And I'm excited for any ears out there that get to listen to your stories. I'm sure it's going to make an impact. And I'm excited to keep going.
Yeah, me too. I'm truly honored to sit at this table with you two badass women and to be part of this conversation and to be part of your work, to be able to work alongside you and help you come up with design solutions and see your beautiful projects at the end of the day. It makes my world go round.
We're so grateful for you. So lucky, truly.
I think we're lucky to have each other. And it's part of that building community thing that I get so much joy out of. I had no idea it would lead me to this, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity and to be part of the first of many amazing conversations with people that care about what they're doing. So I'm super excited to see what you guys do with this.
Lynn Morgan, the woman of the forest.
We'll see what's out in the trees.
And the streams.
Yeah, come walk in the woods with me sometime.
Absolutely. I can't wait.
For sure.
I hadn't heard your story before, but like of growing up in these pieces of your life that all make so much sense to where you ended up here. Like
I know.
I don't know, it's back to that. It's like a no-brainer.
Well, I had really no idea. It was like I took a big chance on this job. It was like so out of my wheelhouse. And you know, this turned out to be the best thing I've ever done. Yeah. You brought me back to my roots.
Full circle.
You know, full circle, totally.
You're describing that in the mindset of growing up in Appalachia and having, this is what kills me these days. So we don't have a sense of enough, and we don't have a sense of gratitude for what we have and how to take care of it and use it, and know that we don't need more. You don't need to neglect something and then just replace it. There's such a missing element of just sacred, and I guess maybe ownership is not even the right word, but sacred possession and caretaking, stewarding, right? It's so easy to flip it, and it's so easy to imagine that there's more out there and you can get it and you can, and that's not the case, actually. And I feel like our culture is going to slam real hard into that pretty fast soon.
Yes.
But it's so much more rewarding to have these connections that remind us that we have finite land. We have finite numbers of trees that can grow successfully with the culture that we've made. We have finite space for people to construct and to live and dwell. So how do we want to do that in a way that feels healthy and sacred?
And we did it out of necessity. And I really feel like that as a culture, we're going to have to come back to it. It's a necessity. The climate is screaming at us to do something, and locally to be able to weave all that together so that you have a connection to the people and the land and all that. And for me, sustainability as a necessity, it's not a luxury. And I think in some of the green building world, it's seen as a little bit of a luxury.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah. There is that sense that's that's the kind of posh thing that you can pick if you really want to like fluff it up and show your incredible taste. Right. But also, no, and in fact, this invitation to face our limitations and treat it as a necessity. Like, this is a necessity, but I'm fascinated to think about the invitation that's out there. If we can, as a collective, if we're not afraid of the limits, but we see the limits as an invitation to actually it's a more rooted life. Actually, it's a more gratifying life when you recognize that this thing came from there because those people put their effort in, and now I get to benefit from this thing and we're going to take care of it. That's so much better than the dollar store junk that nobody cares about. There's no story. It's throw it. Which life actually feels good to live.
Yeah, well, it's nourishing.
Yeah. Talk all day because I know
stuff.
I know. Like, this is the purpose. Here it is. Yeah. Oh my God.
Well, I can't wait for our forest tour.
Yeah, I know. Please invite us.
Yeah, I'm putting one together in June.
Okay.
And Mallory, who might
that's what I was thinking. I was like, I'm not going to say her. I didn't want to say her name wrong, so I didn't say anything. Like, I'm here at the airport.
Nope, exactly. I know it's like it's just such a, I just love her.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're putting together a forest tour in June to visit her Chimacum community forest project that she's been working on. And that'll be an awesome example of selective harvesting where it still looks like a forest.
Really?
Because it still is a forest.
Yeah, it's a day, Bethany.
Do you know, like, can minors come on this tour?
Oh, I think so. I think,
So my husband's from a family of loggers. It's so fun. I didn't want to bring this up because I didn't even have the right things to say about it. But like his great-grandpa, his grandpa, like there's this deep in their bones, like chainsaws in the forest. But my husband is in his own way much more sustainability minded, but like still so connected to the forest. So it's this family, this internal, the four of us family, like hikes through the woods and conversations about the old growth, and then Ted's connection to chopping his firewood and doing whatever. There's so much there that's so good. And I think like a tour like that for my girls to get to come see like a female forester and to see the whole landscape, and like Ted would geek out and love it, and I want to just be there with all of us.
Like because your girls are the future.
They're the ones that are going to see what the forest looks like.
You can inspire them.
Yes.
That there is a different way, that those clear cuts that you guys pass on your way, that, to see that contrast as impressionable young people. That's what we need.
And that's the thing, because we have these family conversations in the car while we're driving along and looking at the awful examples. So it would be so amazing to give them an upfront, and myself too, right? Just an upfront, this is the actual tangible alternative, and it's possible, it's doable. There are ways to work. You need to shift.
Yeah, and I'm hoping, and we're trying to plan it around an active harvest, so you can really see, what's happening. So I think that would be fascinating.
Okay, well, I'd love to get the date from you.
For sure. I'll make sure to put you guys on the list to reach out to when we have it, and we'll probably announce it on the Insta and in our newsletter.
It'll be around.
We'll make a personal invitation to make sure you get out there on that. I'd love to have you join.
I was going to ask you if you have any connections to the New Zealand forestry industry. Like, do you? Only because when I was an undergrad, I was down there for landscape architecture, but 3 of my friends were from Oregon State, and I guess one was in fisheries, but they were one was in the forestry program, and so I was getting a lot of secondhand from her as she was from OSU, but down there and learning the New Zealand forest management practices and all this stuff. And as a very peripheral person, I care about landscape. I was like, these giant plantation forests, and you're growing fast, you're cutting them down, and you're building your products, and you go, I don't know. I love New Zealand, and I'm so curious from this 20 years later, like, what is the perspective on their forestry? And they strike me as a country that has some really amazing potential for better practices, but I don't know specifically with this industry, or if you would have any insight.
Yeah, and I'm not connected with that at all. But yeah, New Zealand is on my bucket list. I definitely want to go visit there.
Yeah.
I think that one of the cool things about FSC is it's a global organization and helping people manage their forests. And especially they've been especially focused on the rainforests and trying to minimize deforestation because that's the key to climate. And so, yeah, I'd be really curious if New Zealand is part, of the service area for FSC. I'm sure that it is. Yeah, I'm sure that it is. So, yeah, just like, having other examples that people can look to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and getting some of those.
Well, but you
people
can that work trip too.
I know, that makes me think of like Ipe, and so many people really want to use Ipe because it's that dark, yummy.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah,
It's beautiful.
Is there anything like? I mean, you and I were talking a while back about ash with just the ash borer that's passing through and seeing ash.
Yeah, that's I don't know really what we're going to do with that. It's
Yeah.
going to be, blue pine is something that I was going to bring up in the conversation. Like, we're talking about like what's the most sustainable thing you can do, and I think utilizing something that's otherwise going to be wasted is a huge part of that. And so, yeah, the ash borer is going to wreak havoc. It's already my brother's property that he's lost all of his ash.
Yeah.
And they like completely hollow out the inside of the log. It's like unusable. So, and I'm like, I'm not sure how long that was deteriorating. And, like as this little bug comes through, how that's going to impact our forest and what we can do with that material.
Yeah, and like if we cut down all the ash trees because we're worried about that, what species will they hop to? Or, there's so many questions.
yeah.
I mean, pest management is
Oh, yeah, a
ideal
huge
and
part.
the mountains
And it's here now. So, yeah, if you are driving down the interstate, you can see big pockets of these burnt orange. They look like they've been burned. Pine trees that are like millions of acres of pine trees are being decimated.
Yeah.
And
that's cool.
it's really cool.
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, I used some of the blue pine paneling in my bathroom.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And it, did a little whitewash on it, so it looks a little bit more modern. And so, yeah, but it's not for everybody.
It's
right?
not for everybody. Yeah, it's a little rustic.
Yep, it is definitely can be a little rustic.
My family's house, it's blue pine interior all over the place. My grandpa loved it. He built this house. My parents added on to it when we moved in when I was a kid, and it's so much wood.
Yeah, so much.
I don't mind it. But
like,
it's a lot.
Yeah,
It's there's a lot of it.
But it's also really unique. It's cool. And he actually got like I don't know my terminology very well, but he got like the lower grade because he loved all the naughty, interesting, unusual markings and stuff. So it's very fascinating, interesting looking.
Yeah. I lived in Colorado for 10 years before moving here, and it was such a interior design experience because people were, I feel like when we lived there, it was like when Rocky Mountain National Forest just became an orange forest. Yeah. And so, the people were just like, what do we do with all this wood?
Yeah.
And
So that's what we're trying to do. It was like figure out uses for things that would otherwise go to waste.
I had a little piece of cedar on my bicep. You looked down and I was like, what creature?
that's so funny. That's very much
Cedar came in. The tree is coming back to make sure we all keep on our toes. Oh my gosh.